Welcome to the Top Broker Podcast for mortgage brokers hungry to settle more loans and take their business to the next level. With your host, Joshua Vecchio.
Hi everybody, Josh Vecchio here. Today I'm thrilled to introduce our guest, Sam Gawinda. He's a director and lending specialist with Rising Tide Financial. He's based in Victoria and one of MPA's Young Guns of 2015. Sam, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
You started your career as a bricklayer. How in the world did you get into mortgage broking?
Yeah, look, a little bit different to, to the norm. I finished school and went into a trade, went into bricklaying, and ended up after completing my apprenticeship and having a couple of years on the tools, I ended up buying a property. And really, long story short, I used a broker at the time to help me secure the funding, and 6 months later, ended up working for him. So, yeah.
You're big in your fitness, aren't you? You love your kite surfing. Tell us a little bit about your health routine and how does this help you with the everyday running of your business?
Yeah, I reckon it's a great point. I've got a bit of a theory that if you're nailing your sleep pattern, your diet, and your exercise, those sort of 3 points of the triangle, everything else, you can perform at your best. And if one of those points of the triangle fall, then basically the other two suffer as well. So, yeah, making sure you're sleeping right, exercising well, and eating well just means that you can, perform at your best each day. So it's not only an enjoyment thing; it's absolutely a performance thing as well.
You're a director of the finance arm for Rising Tide Financial. It's an award-winning institute. I know you've been there with about 3 years now. Tell us a little bit about the snapshot of your value proposition, because you guys do more than loans. It's tax, super, wills, insurance. I mean, give us a bit of insight.
Yeah. So Rising Tide we're a financial service business, and we target the Rising Tide, who are clients that are coming up the hill, young families, young professionals, people that are looking to take debt and get superannuation in order and make sure their personal risk insurances are looked after. And I guess that's opposed to what we would say people coming down the hill and cruising into retirement. So the way we deliver our advice is really aimed at the up and comers. So we specialise and target that demographic through our marketing and our branding.
You've got a unique process. It's all about discovery, knowing who your clients are, planning, creating a roadmap, and also looking to free them, having a freedom plan that makes that plan happen. Tell us a little bit about this process you've got.
Yeah, so look, and that's been adopted a lot from the financial planning of the business. So where I think a lot of brokers can be content to do maybe a needs analysis or a fact find over the phone, and if there's not necessarily business in it straight away, I don't think brokers, and this is a generalisation, but I think a lot of brokers won't spend the time to go and sit down with that client because there might not be business in it straight away. And our ethos is the complete opposite. So we'll sit down in front of everyone. We'll take them through a discovery appointment, which isn't a fact find, but it's a really good get to know each other session. And what we find is, even if the client isn't in a position to necessarily take up my services, for example, they will need some super advice, or they do need a tax return done or something like that. So we will actually take them through the discovery and then the vision appointment. And the vision appointment is the strategy, the recommendations, and the advice piece. And what we find is, even if a client isn't in a position to move forward with any of our recommendations, the fact that we've spent time with them and we've been able to build a relationship with them through that process, we find that they do come back to us. And the other thing we find is they do refer friends and family onto us as well. So just by spending a little bit more time with people, you get to build that relationship, and inevitably business does come off the back of it as well.
And so what you're doing there is you're actually becoming their broker before they need a broker, so you can be their broker when they need a broker, which I think is phenomenal.
It is absolutely spot on. So we've got a couple of young guys in the office that are coming through our grad program. So they're brokers in training, and Tom, who works beside me, is doing a great job. He's only 22 years old, and he's brought at least a dozen of his friends through our process. Now, at 2 years old, some of them are still at university, so there's not a great deal that can be done for these clients yet. But no doubt, given that they've gone through our process and we've given them some education, their financial literacy is tenfold. Well, in a much better position than it was before they went through the process. And it just, we're investing in them, and with no doubt they're going to come back and use us when they're in a position to move forward. So
I love it.
Yeah.
How has this sort of allowed you to write more business? Because in effect, you're creating an ecosystem, not only helping them now, but potentially uncovering other needs that they may not even be aware of, whether it's tax, minimizing that, or whether it's even just a health check on their super or insurances. How has this sort of ecosystem helped you out?
Yeah, look, it's a really good point. So a lot of young Australians, and again, a generalisation, but young Australians and probably all Australians have an infatuation with property as an investment vehicle, and I'm very pro property, and it can be a great way to build wealth. But there's also a lot of things, i.e. super, and risk insurances that don't get talked about a whole lot. So by getting them in, the properties are really, and young Australians can also be intimidated by sitting down and talking to a financial advisor or someone similar. So by getting them in and talking about property, which is ultimately the exciting stuff, they come to speak to us about that. But we also, when we lift the hood of their financial position, we normally find that there's a few other things that need to be addressed as well.
So by looking after the clients, in really looking after their best needs, whether they're aware of it or not, you're not only able to cross-pollinate, but I would imagine that the more you cross-pollinate, the more business not only retains in your Rising Tide group, but it also ensures that when they're ready, should they talk to their financial planner or accountant, they can just remind them, hey, Sam's able to help. He's a great guy. Why don't you see him? And it comes back into this ecosystem you've created. Why would a client choose yourself over another broker? I mean, is it this whole value proposition that you're actually looking for ways in which you can help them not only guard themselves, but also to maximize their position? What does that look like?
Yeah, so what we're big on at Rising Tide is not so much building up the individual, which I think that the industry might potentially have a habit in doing. So I'm not necessarily wanting clients to come to Rising Tide necessarily to deal with me as an individual. I'm wanting them to come to the business to deal with a group that they trust. So our support staff are a massive part of our value proposition to clients, and getting the job done, keeping them updated and communicated throughout the process. So I wouldn't be employing people to come and sit down with Sam Gawendra. I'd be employing people to come and sit down with Rising Tide. So getting the job done, understanding clients' needs, spending time with them, covering the holistic approach where we can certainly meet your lending and property needs, but we can also make sure that the rest of your financial goals and financial roadmap, you're on the right track as well.
So it's all about that value proposition and that you're looking after their whole needs. And by doing that, more lending, more financial planning, more accounting comes up as a result of not only doing a great job, but the brand awareness increases tenfold by keeping it in-house and in a circle of influence. Sam, final question. You've been in the industry for about 6 years now. If you were to meet yourself back then, what advice would you give yourself now, knowing what you know?
And I'm probably dealing. So at the moment, I've got a couple grads, so a couple brokers in training, and they're exactly where I was sort of 5 or 6 years ago. And I guess the advice I give to them all the time is you've just got to put yourself in their shoes. So put yourselves in the client's shoes. Really, for us, we're dealing with people buying property and their finance and things all day, every day. And I think some people can sort of take that for granted, that for a certain client, this property purchase or whatever it is they're doing is the biggest thing going on in their life at the moment, at that point. And it can cause a lot of stress and anxiety. So just make sure that your communication lines, everything, you're absolutely put yourself in their shoes, and that you're keeping them updated you've got the client's best interest at heart, and I think everything else will take care of itself.
Love it.
So,
Love it.
Yeah.
Guys at home, nail the triangle. That's sleeping, exercise, and eating well. Know and start with the end in mind. So what's your target market? What are you looking for? Always have a long-term view with your clients and put yourself in their shoes. Sam, it's been an absolute pleasure. I think there's been some absolute gems that brokers can not only implement now, but also allow them to write more business. Thank you very much for your time, Sam.
Thanks for having me.